Okay, so now what I want to talk about, again, welcome back. If this is a new one, I don't know when I'm going to cut this up during editing. In the previous episode, or earlier this episode, we've been discussing what numeric relationships we can apply to language and just different empirical things that are true about language and how they apply to the ideas and previous facts that we've been discussing. So I have the relationship of primes and vowels. Is there a relationship between primes and vowels, the given number of vowels in a word, how those vowels are arranged, and how those iterate through the word? Is there a relationship between syllables and primes? Is trying to deconstruct things to just vowels, is that too far? Is that not far enough? We'll have some minimum bound in the same way you can't measure past the electron, or you can't measure past three quarks. Those same scale limits will apply to language as well. The evidence of diphthong, right? We have that A-E character that's like squished together. You have the E-O that's squished together in some words, the O-E. And so again, the existence of that in a not so insightful way proves, again, this consolidation, this contraction. We want to be efficient, going back to our efficiency axiom. All physical systems tend towards efficiency. So language, the structure of language in its entirety is going to be forcing itself towards efficiency, regardless of English, Spanish, French, Swahili, Bantu, whatever. And so diphthong, the existence of them is evidence of that. But then again, what really differentiates a vowel or a single syllable or single vowel sound? Why is it two vowels? Why do we have a diphthong? Why do we have an independent word for vowels making the same sounds but not the consonants? Or do we, and I'm just not aware of it, and why? But what's a diphthong? What does it really do? Clearly indicative of some sort of contraction. But what else can we say about that? Many, if not all, words have pronunciation dichotomy, which changes the function in a sentence. For example, if I present to you, I'm giving a presentation, I'm presenting right now, right? If I have a present for you, I've just changed the inflection of what I said between present and present, right? Present, like I'm giving you a show or I'm demonstrating something to you, is more of like in the French, like just like the standard E. And then like if I had a present, it's more like the E with the grave, the down. And so, just simply, I'm asserting that there's probably dichotomy to all words, but it's empirically evident that it is present for many and a lot of words. Again, present is a verb, is to show. A present is a gift. Or we could be a present, like talking about time. And so it can mean different things. It can mean the same thing just based off the inflection. But can we make some sort of numeric or just general logical statement about the iteration of verbs and nouns with inflection? Right? We have the evidence is very clearly there. What can we say definitively about that? Another example was contract, right? If I have a contract to sell my house, that's a noun, it's an agreement. If I contract something, that means to get. I couldn't think of a more precise word, but to get specifically in relation to a disease, right? And so overall point being, the emphasis changes the word's function and what type of word it is in the sentence. How is language consolidating at the species levels between sounds and letters are shapes? How about logic? And so I just have some examples. I have C versus S, and again, a lot of languages that use the Roman alphabet, you will see indistinguishable or very nuanced differentiation between the use of the letter C and the letter S. In for example, Ukrainian versus Russian, they both use the Cyrillic alphabet, like gamma, G, or even like gamma from Greek to gamma. They say gamma, but gamma. I mean, the pronunciation difference is slightly different, but they have the character in both Greek, the Greek alphabet, and the Cyrillic alphabet, but in Ukrainian and Russian, the Ukrainian, the gamma or the gamma is pronounced more of like a ha ha. It's like a more of a soft sound, and in Russian it's ga or like gamma. And so you get more of the G, the g sound. And so how is all of this consolidating again? Now, why is there between one? Why is that there between one word and the other? But in totality, why are we using these sounds to represent these physical processes, and how are we representing them with the shapes? And obviously, we already know the answer. In extreme generality, meaning that it's going to always tend to evolve to the most efficient state, the most efficient equilibrium. Other examples we have, again, the letter C in Polish would be tse, and the unique character tse in the Cyrillic alphabet represent the same exact sound but with different shapes. To exemplify what I just said about the consolidation, we have the exact same sound represented by different shapes in different alphabets. But the overall application to what it applies to logically, or when we use them in the construction of word, should be similar because it's both based on the sound tse. Another example of this that is widely known is color versus color. Again, in English, in British English, in American English, literally the British English spelling is with the U, and the American English is not. So again, that's clear evidence of, again, large-scale evolution and iteration. Not just me, not today, not tomorrow, but of people in language over hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of years. And then also, now we have an iteration logically, right? We have the word line in English, like let's get in line, let's get ready to go to the movie, let's get in the line for the movie. Or if you're in England, you'd say let's get in the queue. We're queuing up, we're getting in line. And so again, that's the same word. It's clearly, it's a substantially different in terms of the shape to which represent that sound and that word and that logic, but it means the same thing within the same language. And then you have a fundamental one, theater versus theater, or theatre. Just like slur to a French accent there. Theatre is what I would say. But theater and theater with the RE or ER. Again, showing just the iteration of language, and that one is using the exact same set of shapes, just in different order. And so, do consonants cycle and iterate? We clearly have an answer of yes. How do they iterate? That's what we're trying to nail down. Vowels vibrate. So, again, when we're talking about the differentiation between the letters of Polly's prancing pony or whatever, of alliteration, right? Vowels vibrate. That is an alliteration. That is a fundamental alliteration. But again, just spreading out from dichotomy. I have spreading out from dichotomy. But if it rhymes, it's wrong. One of the thieves that's well known in today's popular science discourse said that, but it is true, unfortunately. But I will not reference his name, but I'm sure you can figure it out. But that logic is true, right? If it rhymed, it's from the similar logic family. We need to differentiate because we need to describe different situations. That's the point of language. And so the more close it is, whether it's a letter, whether it's the sound, whether it's the form of the word, those are all showing relations to similarity and trying to differentiate. And so, again, back to the alliteration, sound kind of juvenile or childish or like you're doing something. It wouldn't sound like a natural statement to make. And that is why. Time, unique strings, sensorality, siphons. Okay, so in the same way, again, we have those alliterations. Vowels vibrate is the fundamental alliteration for vibration. Again, connecting the logic of vibration to fundamental ontology. But now we need to try to create our axiom. We need to iterate a sensor, or sensorality. So what is the most general thing we can say about sensorality in form of alliteration, which will branch off of or build down from its in its logic pyramid? Sensorality siphons. To siphon is to filter. And so to siphon something is to differentiate it, to censor it. And so the fundamental, we've identified the existence of a fundamental alliteration. Again, we've already identified the form of the solution. It is what it is. We've already identified a unique, specific solution, sensorality, and now we're deriving past that into sensor and showing its relation into the next axiom. And so a sensorality siphons. That is the fundamental alliteration for the sensorality logic family. What are the roles of prepositions and expression? Right, prepositions increase generality. If I say Johnny hit Johnny hit the baseball, Johnny is the subject, hit is the verb, baseball is the I don't know if we're the baseball. We're getting to the next part of the language in the next one, I don't know. But the point being is if you said he hit the baseball, right, he generalizes Johnny. And so when you learn a new language, you'll notice the first thing you do, excuse me, I just said prepositions for my definition of pronouns. Forget that, I'm not going to edit it out. What I just said is true about pronouns, not prepositions. But prepositions, like a prepositional phrase, is just, if you learn a new language, the first thing that's going to stick out of any language, anywhere, anytime, blah, 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 is prepositions. Because even if you're remotely familiar with the script, I mean, if you go look at Chinese or Japanese or any of the Southeast Asian languages, or just where you can see the shapes and you know what the sounds are supposed to be or the letters are supposed to be, you can typically pick out which one's a noun and which one's a verb based on their form. But prepositions logically are always what make language learning the thing that people never think about in their native language, is the prepositions, because a lot of them are effectively word salad, but they're conjunctions or combinations of two other words that you never really think about, but you just use so many times that it's just instinctual to you, or to a natural reaction because it's your native language. That is why you get stuck on prepositions in learning a new language, and pronouns increase the generality of the subjugation of what you're talking about. So, misspoke there, but I'm not going to edit that. I don't care, because if you actually want to learn, you can listen. If not, I don't care either. I just have a sentient filter, a sentient filter has sensorality. Right? In the same way people say, I have autonomy, I have agency, I have control over my body, I have sentience, I have the ability to feel, I have sensorality. And so, another aspect of language that we typically see is the suffix. You'll see a change in suffix when you're being specific as when you're being general. When you're referencing something that has sentience and we're referencing something that does not have sentience. And so this is a very meaningful factor, right? If I have a candy dispenser, dispenser spelled D-I-S-P-E-N-C-R, like a quarter, you put a quarter in, you turn the knob, a piece of candy comes out. That's a dispenser. It ends with an E-R. But if you have, and this is, again, you can find a ton of examples, but if you have like an orator, like someone who speaks, that ends with an O-R. So very typically, and again, on a rigorous mathematical level, I'm thinking it's all, but certainly a lot, enough where there's evidence where it's clearly there's some sort of relationship here. We have dispenser or orator with an OR referencing a person. Something with sensorality words typically have pronouns that end in OR to reference a person, whereas in inanimate objects typically get an ER, like a candy dispenser with an ER is typically there. So that's kind of a differentiation. That's certainly evident. Exactly how do we solidify that towards our derivation of the axiom of sensorality? Working on it, again, with all of these things are just putting the ideas out there, talking them out loud. But then again, we go back to our dichotomistic pairs. And that's what, again, when you see all my derivation, that's really what I do, is I take two words in complete generality and then I compare them. Then I compare the forms of the words between them. And I compare the logic, what they represent between those. And all of those different things draw different relationships for me. All of them. So, again, just some, but I have dichotomistic pairs show fundamental iteration of syllability. Syllability, how many syllables are in a word, what letters and what sounds comprise those syllables, and how do those relate to other syllables to form words, to form sequences of logic. Iteration, just using it back and forth. What order of the words come in? What does that do to the value? What is it saying with that sentence? And dichotomy is just two different ideas. But like, for example, we have steak and we have skate. Both use the exact same letters, the exact same, like the T is just, the T and the K are iterated. They're in the different positions, right? You can say S is in position 1, T is in 2, A3, K4, E5. And so we can do that. We can do something with the Pauli exclusion principle, just spin up, spin down, or some sort of the filling of electrons. We can have some sort of filling of letters into this form as well. But we have steak, skate, we have late, tail. Right, you just switch the positions of T and L and tail, T-A-L-E, and you get late. And then the one I really want to focus on is converse and converse. Right, converse and conserve, excuse me. I just did the intonation thing again. But if we're conversing, or converse and conserve, it's the same exact use of letters. One of the positioning, obviously the S and the V's are mixed or switched positions. The sequence and structure of the sentence is the same past that. Converse, conserve. And so then you just add more prefix and suffix, conversation and conservation. So we have a fundamental identity between the concept of conservation and conversation. And so now we can apply some sort of conservation law to conversation. And so we'll put a big old box with the X's through it and the QED to say we finished our proof there. But that is the finish of the proof, and now we're just, again, for me to get to an axiomatic proof, I have to derive complete proofs multiple times over, pretty much typically around 7. Again, being the last prime number, being the prime number to completion, the last day of the week, right? 7 differentiations of your cell until you become a human being or until you become a zygote. Exactly 7. So 7 is the prime towards completion. And again, you can, right, sensorality. So sensorality has 5 syllables. Sensoriality has 6 syllables. And so once I can derive that, and you might say, well, I've never heard of sensorality. Well, I've never heard of sensoriality. I've never heard of vibriality. So again, these are just forms of words. And then it derives down into the words we actually use. So again, that's back to the connection of the fundamental physics. We use, phantom particles. These are kind of like phantom words. They're not really phantom at all. They're empirically there, but they're just so general nobody uses them and it's pointless. But we can just continue to draw our numeric statements and relations and apply those to language in its entirety and just continue on with our proof. But another thing that I found, this will probably be, we'll just end with a fun historical note that I definitely think is true. But eunuchs were castrated, so just in my derivation, and that's where I'm a savant. That's where it's synesthesia. It's just the amount of connections that I can make is just it's literally innumerable. But I just came across the word eunuch or Enoch, which was really like some dude in the Bible, but he was a translator. Again, some piece of logic got picked up. But then a eunuch is somebody that was castrated. But so the word eunuch, to enunciate, right? If you enunciate something properly, you're well, you're clear, you're concise, you're direct. And so for a eunuch to enunciate properly, they castrated them. And they were castrated. Why? Right? Today you've heard of, I'm sure all the males out there at least have heard of post-nut clarity. It's when you have an orgasm, you're thinking of doing something stupid, maybe hooking up with an ex late at night, and then you have some alone time, and then you're like, whoa, that's a very bad idea to get back involved with the ex. That's what people call post-nut clarity. But not that it's a joke, but the emotionality, your emotions, your hormones, which produce emotions, influence your decision making a lot more, like we've discussed previously. And so after you remove the emotions, or some of them at least, you make more informed decisions. And so the historical motivation to castrate eunuchs was so they could enunciate more clearly. They could speak without emotion. They could speak logically and fair. but and sometimes they just did it to slaves and whatnot. But historically and linguistically, eunuch has intimate relations to enunciate, which the eunuchs have intimate relations to castration. So I thought that was a fun little historical fact to end on that I came across today. So again, I know I stuttered a lot. Again, pause, but I'm putting together logic literally nobody's ever done before, and then I'm deriving it down and proving it down to the letter. So that's fun stuff. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.